Hi, hello, it's me, Julian Greystoke. I am an indie author and, as you might guess by the title of this video, a pantser. I'm sure everybody's really sick of hearing me say pantser, so we can also say discovery writer, that's fine too. I'm doing a new video today, it's a spite-driven video. It's spite-driven, if you want to know. One of my viewers sent me something on Twitter, which is basically a link to one of Jenna Maressi's videos, except for she had transcribed it and the transcript was on her blog. It's from one of her older videos, How to Write Fantasy, 10 Tips for Writing Fantasy, and lo and behold, one of her absolute favorite pieces of advice is in that video. Guess what it is? Can you guess? Yes. Jenna says this. Number 10, outline. I saved this for last because I didn't want you shitting your pants until the end. I know pantsers are very protective of their method, and I'll concede that it can work for some writers, but fantasy is not the genre to pants. End quote. To which I say, my sister in writing, then what are these? And what about the fantasy trilogy that I'm on book 3 of right now? And Jenna, I pantsed all of them. So Jenna claims that fantasy is not the genre to pants. I would question her and ask, what is the genre? And she would say none of them, because she doesn't believe any of them are the genres to pants. She believes that everything must be plotted. But that aside, there are definitely some genres that even I would agree probably work better if you plot them. Things like murder mysteries or thrillers. But dear Jenna and everyone watching, fantasy lends itself really well to being pantsed. I hate to tell you this, but this is one of the ones that works out well. It's a good thing for me that I like writing fantasy because it also lends itself very well to the way that I write. So, out of pure spite, I decided to make my own video of tips for how to pants a fantasy. Which does make it sound like I'm gonna run up to a fantasy book and pull its trousers down, so I can see why some people think this does sound a bit silly. But let's talk about how I write fantasy books going in without a plan. And I think I have managed to scrape together 10 tips, and none of those tips are going to be telling you that you have to do it my way. Because the first thing I'm going to tell you, which is not one of my tips, is that all of us are different and I am not the god of writing. So if any of these tips help you, great, and if these tips don't work for you, then they don't work for you. That's the thing about us pantser/discovery writers, is that we're all very different and our methods vary widely, which I think is why it's so hard to come up with advice videos for pantsers, is because we all have our own weird little strategies. So if something doesn't work for us, we just adjust until it does. We don't have a lot of methods with fancy names like the spiderweb method or whatever that is, or the snowflake method, I think it's snowflake. All of these fancy names for all of these different plotting methods, we don't have any of that. So going into this, obviously know that I'm not the god of writing, I am just the trickster god of AuthorTube. Number 1, my first piece of advice for how I write fantasy books without a plan. Ditch those complex character sheets. Some people love them. They love to write down all these facts about their characters beforehand. They have to know their characters inside and out before they begin writing. That's not me. Characters come to me, and they do have fairly strong personalities when they get to me, but I get to know those personalities through writing the book. Now, does this mean that sometimes I have to go back and adjust their story just slightly to make it fit with the personality that I learn about through the story? Yeah. Do I have a problem with that or think that that's wrong? Nope. I just mentally meet my lead characters and they demand to be put into a story, and I will make them one as long as I already have a fairly strong idea of the inciting incident and what overall type of story I am trying to tell. Is it a romance? Is it a drama? What kind of story am I telling? I guess that's kind of 2 tips rolled into one. The first one being get to know your characters through the story, and the second one being at least know your inciting incident and what type of story you're trying to write at the beginning. But you know what? That would make it 11 tips. Although maybe I should make it 11 tips. Jenna only had 10 and I have 11. Ha! Tip number 3. We have 11 now. Discover new characters through the story and trust yourself. Many plotters would also balk at the idea of not having other side characters planned out before the story begins, but I never even know who my characters are going to meet along the way. I mean, sometimes I do. Sometimes other characters will come to me and they'll be like, I need to be a side character in this story. And I'll be like, okay, well, wait your turn. I'll try to get you in when I can get you in. But sometimes I'll just be writing along and I'll be like, who's this now? Hello. There's a character in Adventurer Mage 3 that was like that. I didn't know that he was going to happen, and then there he was. And I'm just like, well, I'm going to fit you in the story somehow, buddy. Tip number 4, though, does pertain to this, and that is stay focused on the lead characters. Some of us can become distracted and start finding our side characters more interesting than our main characters, but to be successful, I find that I have to remember to stay committed to my main characters. They were the first ones to appear, they were the ones that I fell in love with first, and this is their story. So as enticing as I might accidentally make one of my side characters, I have to let them stay side characters and not get bogged down trying to write their story instead. Number 5 kind of pertains to one of my earlier ones, which is know the ending. I like to know how my story is going to end before I start writing it. Now, that doesn't mean I know every detail. In fact, usually it's just a broad overview, like, I want the bad guy to be defeated. That's it. I'll find out how the good guys do it when they get there. It might be something like, I want the bad guy to be defeated in this way, such as, I want him to be defeated by having all of his money taken, or I want him to be defeated by him being publicly shamed, or I want him to be defeated by having his ass handed to him. Any of them are good options, but I'm gonna wait till I get there to find out how the characters do it. Also details about the ending, like I want it to be a happy ending, I want it to be a bittersweet ending, I want it to be an open ending. Things like that I also tend to know.
This is Julian in post. I'm re-recording tip number 6 because I didn't like the way it turned out when I recorded it the first time. Yay for doing things in post. Anyway, tip number 6 is what I call fog of war world building, which is my style for pantsing. The world building, again, revolving around the characters. My pantsing style is very reliant on the characters. Yours doesn't necessarily have to be, but the way that I build my world is sort of like I like to say with a video game fog of war on. In many games, you don't get to see the entire map, and as you explore more and more of the map is revealed. Similarly, when I am pantsing a book, the only things that get revealed about the world are the things that my characters can either learn about or are interested in asking about or know already. If they are not interested in learning about or don't know some things that just aren't important to the story, they don't need to learn about, then they never will, and that's okay. I'm not one of those authors that has to have such a big, complicated, fleshed out world that I have to have every single detail on the page. The reader has to know every tiny minutia. Now, that's not to say that I don't often know some of those tiny minutia, but the way I world build that works well for pantsing is this method, keeping my world building within what the characters are interested in learning or already know.
Tip number 7 is I build a world for my characters. Now, not everybody's going to do it this way, of course, but I'm incredibly character-oriented. So my characters show up first, and I construct a world specifically for them. For example, in the Adventurer Mage series, the world that I created in that series was made specifically for Valentine and Maeve, and I would really struggle to write anyone else in that series. This confuses my husband a lot. He's like, why don't you just use that world for a different story? And I'm like, I can't. I made it for them. That's their world. Once you have the characters and you kind of have an idea of what sort of journey you'd like them to take, then you can mold the world around them to challenge them or help them in that journey.
I should probably explain a little bit about why this works so well for pantsing. So when I anchor the world with the characters, it allows me to create a world that is surrounding and beneficial to the way that I want the characters to grow, the story that I want to tell for them, because I'm not only a pantser but also a very character-driven author. So this avoids the problem that some plotters have. I say some, not all. Some plotters have the problem of creating huge intricate worlds and then having to kind of shoehorn the characters into them, where I find that if I start with the characters and build the world as I build the characters, as I build the plot, everything for me comes together so much more cohesively because it was all designed together as I was pantsing the story. Everything from the magic to the creatures to the cultures, all designed to be a cohesive unit as I was creating the story as I go.
Number 8, similar to meeting characters as you go, meet the creatures of this world as you go. Because I go characters, world, creatures, that means that as I'm creating the world for the characters, I'm creating the creatures for the world. It just stacks. It's a beautiful Russian nesting doll of fun. As my characters discover the creatures of this world, I make sure that I ask myself, how does this creature fit into this world? How did it evolve here? Or if it didn't evolve, how was it created? Why does it live in the environment that it lives in? What makes it best suited for this environment? If it's domesticated, how and why was it domesticated? All of those important questions that I think most of us authors ask, I just kind of do it all at once while I'm drafting. Tip number 9, religion, same as the critters. Once again, I create a world for the characters, and part of the world is often religion, possibly more than one religion if you're really wanting to challenge yourself in your fantasy world. And all you gotta do is make sure that it fits the world that you've made for the characters. It's like you're building a jigsaw puzzle, but you didn't look at the box first. I build a magic system based on how it can interact with my characters. I build it around them, again, leaning heavily on characters. Do my characters have magic? Why or why not? How do they feel about that magic? How has that magic affected their lives from their childhoods onward? All things to think about, and obviously, like I said, I lean it heavily based on my characters.
Now, I will concede that pantsing a book lends itself better to a soft magic system, but it doesn't necessarily have to. We're going to talk about note-taking a little bit further down the line, but as long as you make sure that whenever you come up with a cool new thing for your magic to do, that you go back through in editing and make sure that everything is internally consistent within the mythology of your book and everything makes sense within the world that you've created, then pantsing it works out just fine because you can come up with a lot of really awesome ideas on the fly as you're going, oh no, these characters are in this situation. What can my magic do about that situation, if anything?
And my number 10 tip is discover everything as you go, but write it all down in a notebook. This is where I think Jenna is confused. She seems to believe that pantsers never take any notes, never keep track of anything, and then somehow expect to just like hold all of it in their brains. I don't think any of us do that. I don't think any of us are quite that good. I mean, if you are somebody who like never has to write a single note and you can hold it all in your brain, like I bow to you. This is the Adventurer Mage notebook. It starts out empty as I begin to write the story, but as I go, I begin to fill it up. We have things like crude maps. Lots of information about characters, just pages and pages of every character we encounter. Every time I name somebody, they're going in this book. Names of ships, names of cities, names of mountain ranges, names of rivers, everything. If I come up with something as I'm drafting that I want to change later at the beginning of the book, then I'll write that down in this notebook. Also creatures. As I create them in the story, I do little sketches of them. And anything that I've told the reader about them, I mark down in my notebook. So it might seem like I'm going into this completely willy-nilly, but I just let the story flow and then keep track of what I've already written down, which to a plotter is going to seem completely nonsensical and backwards, but that's just how it works. So I highly recommend you get yourself a notebook, make it a pretty one. I like this notebook for this notebook is pretty perfect for the Adventurer Mage series. And keep track of everything as you go. It'll save yourself a lot of time and energy trying to figure out what you named that small town that you mentioned somewhere between chapters 5 and 8. You don't have to keep a physical notebook. There are other note-taking programs and such that can be just as useful, and potentially you could even use some of the tools that people use for plotting, just like fill them out afterward. For example, after I finish a story, I create a spreadsheet that is my scene breakdown. Many plotters would do this beforehand. I just do it after. There you go. Those are my 11 tips out of spite for how to pants a fantasy novel, because yes, fantasy actually lends itself incredibly well to this style of writing. That's not to say that it doesn't also lend itself fine to plotting. It's just that of the many genres, this one works quite well for pantsers. Thanks everybody for watching. Don't forget to check out my fantasy books that you can purchase on Amazon right now. Also, if you want to read another fantasy story that's going to have 3 books in the series, but is in the process of being edited, you can check out the first draft of the first 2 and probably like half books up on my Wattpad. They will not be there forever. As soon as the first book becomes available for purchase, all of them are going away off of the internet. So if you want to read them for free, now's the time to do it. Don't forget that you can support me over on Patreon, where all of your donations go towards helping me self-publish my own books, and actually right now they also go towards just helping me live my life. They just help us keep the lights on around here, and with how dark some of my videos are, you know we need all the help we can get. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget that all my social media is linked in the doobly-doo for ease of your clicking, and I will see all of you again next time with whatever it is I happen to be doing next time. Bye!
Look, I have one job on this lousy ship. It's stupid, but I'm gonna do it, okay?
KJ, LaFone, Unicorn Jenny, Celia, Neon, Taya, Alyssa, Deborah, My96, Afra, Melissa, Swamp Goblin Waifu, Sophia, Marween, Kit, Hidden Glade, Light Julie, Belle, Patrick, Anne Sophie, Callison, Ray, Shelby, Zaire, Jesper, Rennie, Scribbling Cat, Savvy, Jenny, Amanda, Lisa, and Sarah.